Hello, everybody. I am so excited to share with you the supplies that I have been using to annotate my books, how I'm keeping them organized, and how I'm actually using them inside the books to get more out of my reading. And I can't wait to share this with you. So let's get started. So today I'm going to share how I'm annotating books on writing, but you could use this for any type of nonfiction. I also plan to use this in some fiction as well, as I learn to continue to pick apart and study how others have written books, what parts of them really resonate with me, how, like, sometimes you can hear someone explain how something works, but when you actually see it in action, you learn a lot more from it. And I want to do this with intention. And when I first started out as a writer, gosh, I guess I started really getting serious about writing in 2007. I spent a lot of time reading books on writing, just about everything I could get my hands on. And a lot of that has stuck with me. A lot of those books I plan to revisit now that I have a different perspective after writing almost 30 novels of my own. But I also got so busy with my family and YouTube and other things that I fell off from reading a lot of books on writing. And as I have been sort of romancing my writing again, part of that process has been going back to read books on writing, because one of the best ways to learn how to be a writer is to, like, if you've ever heard of the term slipstream, it's basically taking someone who's already like a mentor, who's already learned all the things you want to learn, and then using their knowledge to move yourself along faster. And of course, if all we had was studying fiction, we could eventually figure it out. And a lot of us are already intuitively writing stories the way that we've learned just by consuming stories. But for me, something that puts me in a slipstream or gets me faster results in my learning is reading books on writing. And I have a huge stack of them that I have only read a handful of. I've actually read The Heroine's Journey by Gail Carriger once, and I'm reading it again. But I think I bought maybe 20 new books on writing, and I've only read 2 or 3 of them. So I'm going to make a point during this Preptober National Novel Writing Month time, this last quarter of the year, to really start reading more books on writing. And part of that process that sort of romanticizes it, makes it more fun, and makes it more effective is annotating. This is something I haven't really done since college. So I've been consuming lots of other videos on how people are annotating both fiction and nonfiction, and I started to just dive into it. So let me show you what I'm using and how I'm using it in these books. So first things first, I just have a simple pen case from Moving Option, Nomadic, maybe something. I think I got this from Jet Pens years ago. I just have a little Tokidoki unicorn charm. And then I got this, I think just somewhere in a little shop in downtown Dallas. It's like a little boba tea charm that I put on here. Not that that matters to my annotating, but the cuter something is, the more I want to reach for it. I know it's silly, but it's true. So I love this pen case. It has a big, wide open space that I can keep my note cards. I can keep my highlighters and my Sharpie pens and stuff like that. In here, I have all of my page flags. And then this also has a spot that opens up here where I can keep more page flags, some sticky notes, and some other like whiteout and things like that. So this stays with the book that I'm currently working on. And so if I decide I'm going to go read, I just pull this out. What I was trying to do when I started reading more books on writing this year was I was trying to just read through them, and instead of marking in the pages, I was writing down my notes in a separate notebook. But I found that that was really holding me back, because I can't go sit on my back porch, for example, and have both a book and be juggling a hardcover notebook and a bunch of pens. So it became something that I could only use when I was sitting down at a desk. And I realized I just don't have time to do that. I need something that I can do while I'm just casually like hanging out with the kids, or out at a baseball game and I've got a little bit of time, or like waiting in the line to pick the kids up from school. So I decided that I was going to actually write in my books. And I know that this feels almost like a huge taboo for some people. So I apologize if writing in books is not your thing, but there are other options than actually writing in your books, which I'll go over in just a minute. But I don't mind writing in my books. I haven't yet done this with fiction, but I will share what I'm going to be doing in some of my fiction to basically learn different, like how different authors handle different story elements with a choice few books. But right now I'm just starting with my nonfiction, and I'm making my way back through The Heroine's Journey, which is such a great read. I highly recommend this book. And let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see a video for NaNoWriMo or coming up in Preptober on this channel about what I consider my favorite must-read books on writing novels, because I definitely have a list. So here's what I've been doing. I have, in terms of supplies, I have these simple page flags. I know, I'm sorry for the glare here. I'm going to just kind of move that book so it doesn't get so bad. These I got from Amazon, and I have basically 2 sets of them. So I have these simple ones, and then I also have this set. And these I have been using in my actual plotting notebook, which is this notebook here. And you can see I have page flags everywhere in my house right now, I feel like. So I've been using these in my plotting, so you can kind of see some of these pages here. And I like this set because I love to make sure that whatever I use for color coordination basically has a matching pin, and it's easy to find matching Post-its for it. Because when I choose color schemes like something more like this, I find it very difficult to find like all these different gradients of blue. But it's easy enough to find Post-its and pins that has a green one, a yellow one, an orange one, a red one, a blue one, a purple one, a green one. Like that's pretty easy. So I choose an easy to find color palette. So I know I can always find highlighters, pens, and other supplies that match my color palette. So I'm using that again, in theory, here in my annotating supplies. And I actually have, let's see, I have an example here because I took this notebook and put them in here. So I've been just kind of using this one up, but this is the one that I'm planning to use in my annotating. And I'm not using all of these different colors because these 2 are kind of similar in shade. So what I'm using is this top purple one, blue, green, yellow, orange, pink. So I'm not really using the second purple one, but I'm using all the others. I'll find another use for this, like in my plotting. Besides, it's always the purple one that goes first because that's usually my heroine's color. So then I started looking on Amazon to see if I could find highlighters that looked similar in terms of color scheme, because sometimes you get highlighters and they're too neon, or they're too mild, or they're too dark. And I wanted to find one pack of colors that I felt like I could match with one pack of sticky notes. And I actually, it's ridiculous kind of how much time I spent doing this, because the matching is important to me. And so I went even into people's comments where they had done color swatches. And even though these look more pastel, I knew from the color swatches that they actually would match pretty well. So if you want to see those swatches, it's these page flags from Amazon. I'll link these down below. And then it's these Zaire highlighter that are macaron color. These are the ones that I got, and the colors match, I mean, literally almost perfectly. The only one that's off, I would say, is the blue. Looks kind of more green, but I think it's good enough for me. So then I went through and I looked for, these are off-brand, so this is like VanPad or something. These are not Post-it notes. Now, if you're doing a Kanban board like I do with my HB90 system, highly recommend that you get the actual Post-it brand. But for purposes of just putting things into books when you're not going to expect them to like stick on a wall or something, these are perfectly fine. And I was able to find a pack of sticky notes that had basically the same colors. So you've got the purple, the blue, green, yellow, orange, and pink. So this turned out perfectly. I will link all these supplies. None of them are very expensive, which is nice also. So I have the page flags to basically mark any pages that I find something that I want to call out. Then I have the highlighter for when I want to actually highlight an item or a section to draw attention to it. Then I have the sticky notes for if I want to expand on my thoughts, but I don't really have enough room inside the actual book. Now, sometimes I have been writing like a little exclamation point or something like that, but for the most part, I don't have like a ton of room inside the book to write long notes about my thoughts. So I will use these page flags that coordinate with or these sticky notes that coordinate with the page flags to write more detailed notes. So these are the main supplies that I've been using. Now in this same little case here that I feel like I've had this case for so many years. It's even got like pen marks in it because I've had it for so long, probably 10 years. But I have a Sharpie. This is like a fine point permanent marker Sharpie because these will write on page flags. If you try to take just like a gel pen and write on the page flags, it's gonna smear like crazy. But if you use a Sharpie or something like a Lumo color or a dry erase marker, they'll write on top of the page flags just fine. I also like to keep just a regular gel pen in here for writing in the margins. I like sometimes when I have like a particularly interesting thing that I want to look up, I will underline it as well. So I like to have a black pen. I have whiteout here, although I haven't needed to use it, but it's in there just in case. But this is really the core of the items that I have. Page flags, sticky notes, highlighters, and Sharpie and a regular pen. Now, what if you don't want to write in your book? So I do have some example. Let me pull this out over here. So you can actually get clear sticky notes on Amazon. So if you just can't bring yourself to actually write in a book, that's fine, especially if you want to like resell it or whatever. Like I tend to hold on to all of my books on writing. Well, all my books in general. So what you could do is you could just place this over the top so that you're not actually writing in the book. And then you can use this Sharpie or you could use colorful Sharpies. Now highlighter is gonna just rub off on this type of plastic, but you could underline if you wanted to, excuse me. So you could do this, and there's lots of colors of these Sharpie pens, and you could leave like yourself a little note here if you wanted to, like, why did she do that? You know, or whatever. And you could write in it. Another option is if you wanted to, you could use a combination of these page flags that are colorful and the clear ones. So you could mark your page, but you could also use these as highlighters, basically. So you could go in with your green, try to just get one, and you could just highlight this with the green. And if you don't, like, obviously this isn't gonna take up the entire width of this, but if you just wanted to make sure you were highlighting a certain section, you could put this here, and then you could put the clear one underneath it, and you could underline the portions that you wanted to keep, and then you could still put the green tab on the side. So there are ways to get around it if you don't want to actually mark in your book. Now, what am I actually marking down? Let's talk about that. So I spent a little bit of time thinking about what did I want to do to create as a key. Ideally, I would love to find my own system and use the same key throughout all of my books on writing so that I can always say, oh, if there's a definition, then it's always going to be green. Or if there's a key idea or a list or something that's researched, I know what color to look for. But I figure I'm going to give myself a little bit of time to develop that system because I'm going to use it and then I'm going to figure things out. But I'm going to mark my key at the beginning with the highlighters. I started out with purple as a quote to remember. But in this book, I didn't really have, I realized like quote to remember became really key ideas. So for this particular book, I changed purple to when she explains the differences between the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. So I don't know how this will translate to other books. Like the next book that I'm planning to use this on is Wired for Story by Lisa Cron. I loved her book Story Genius, so I'm excited to read this as well. And so purple is probably going to be something different, and I'll develop that as I go. But for now, it's something specific to the book's content, which is the difference between hero and heroine's journey. Green is all the definitions. So when she defines a concept like the heroine's journey, what does it mean? That is a definition. And so I have it in green. So let me show you an example of that. A definition is here. She's got a section on writing terms, and she says, what is a beat? So beats form the component parts of a story structure. So I know that this is one of the writing terms I wanted to remember, but really this entire section, so I went back and just highlighted this, is a series of terms, right? So it's all definitions, but this was one that I really liked the way she explained it. All of the blue ones are examples or references to other things. So examples of the heroine's journey. So she goes through Demeter's story. I've got a blue one here. This is Isis's story. There's a few more that she goes through, like the myth here, or here she talks about Wonder Woman is an example of the hero's journey. And even though Wonder Woman is gendered as a woman, it's still a hero's journey and not a heroine's journey. So it's really interesting. So I highlighted the examples or references that I might want to refer back to, or just remember from this. Key ideas and lists. So there's a lot of these here, and sometimes I'm like, maybe I don't want to use yellow for this because it's not my favorite color, but like I said, we might adjust. So for example, here's a list of the heroine's journey basic beats. And I also have a yellow page flag on the hero's journey basic beats. And so if I ever want to remember them, I know that I can find them in a yellow page flag. Orange is further research. So whenever she mentions something like myth or another book on writing, or here she says, check out the concept of this, or The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is, I've looked into, and I have this book, A Fire in the Mind, talking about the biography of Joseph Campbell, but I haven't read it yet. So that's a reference. That's something like another book that she references that I would like to research more. And then I wasn't sure what I was going to use this pink for, but as I began to read this, it became very clear to me that I wanted to mark places where I just really loved Gail's voice, or she made me laugh, or she said something really interesting, or she said something that I have agreed with, or I was like, yes, yes, yes. So I just marked it as I love this. So an example of that is, well, it's just funny. I don't want to show that as an example. Oh my gosh, but it was so funny. So here, for example, she says, these narrative elements are tools of clarity like the rules of grammar, and similarly, it's best to know the rules before you break them. And I say this all the time about story structure is, people will say, I don't want to learn how to plot, or I don't want to learn story structure because it's going to keep me in a box. But I always say, like, if you know the rules, then you know how to break them. But if you don't know the rules at all, you're just like throwing spaghetti at a wall. And so I think it gives you power. And here she echoed what I feel, like giving you clarity. It's just more tools. You got to know the rules and then you can play with them. So I was like, I love this. I marked it. There's a lot of those pink flags. So I'm doing this. I am also going in and making my own table of contents of key concepts here in the front of the book. Now, this is something that I cannot remember now the name of the guy that I learned this from, but it was on Tiago Forte's YouTube channel. So I will link that and his website down below, where he was talking about when he reads books, one of the ways that he gets the most out of it is he will underline or go through and annotate his books. But also, even though you have a table of contents in the front, that is just giving you chapters, but he goes in and he makes his own table of contents. So here I've got a definition of the hero and heroine's journey, 5 elements of a hero versus heroine, terms and definitions, the hero's journey beats, and the heroine's journey beats, so that I know these are the key concepts I want to keep coming back to, and I have them not just tagged or flagged, but I also have them in my own little table of contents here. Now, what he says he also does is when the book is finished, he will go through into this back flap and he will write down his key takeaways in his own words from the book. So I'm excited to use that as well. And I love that some of these books have multiple pages of blank space here for me to use. So that is how I am using my annotating. And it's helping me absorb the material faster. It's helping me learn and remember. And it's also making it easier when I need to come back and reference some of this. Now, what I also plan to do is after I've finished reading a book, I want to go through to the key ideas and concepts, this yellow page flag, and I want to add those key ideas or definitions and some of these main points that I have flagged and put them into my reading journal. So this is where my actual notebook that I had started before will still become useful for me, but I don't have to fill it out as I'm reading, which really was slowing me down. Instead, now I will fill it out once the book is done, and I'll go through and pick out the page flags that I felt were most important and be able to distill that down into some major points in the book. So that is what I'm doing. I'm reading The Heroine's Journey. Next is Wired for Story by Lisa Cron, and I'm going to also revisit Pep Talks for Writers by my friend Grant Faulkner, who is the executive director of NaNoWriMo. This is really good, and you can see I had started years ago when this first came out to sort of mark my favorite sections, but this is just full of pep talks, ideas, how to get unstuck, and things like that. So I wanted to go back through it. And these are really short reads, just a few pages each. So if you started now, you could finish this even if you just read one tiny little chapter or a couple pages every day before Nano. I will link these below. But again, if you would like to see a more in-depth video on how I'm annotating not only which books I like best, but how I'm going to annotate fiction to learn from those authors and what are my favorite books on writing, then make sure that you give this video a like and comment down below. Make sure you're subscribed. And I also will be starting Preptober extravaganza next week. Our Preptober planner will be ready soon. It's going to be the best one ever, and it is totally free. So I'm excited to share that with you guys. And we've got a lot of great content on writing and how to win NaNoWriMo, and just for all writers, even if you don't participate in Nano. So I hope you'll join me for that. And if you are going to be at NINC, by the time this goes up, I will be there at the Novelists Inc. conference. So make sure you come and say hello to me. I hope to see some of you there, and I will see you guys next week for Preptober. All right, see you then. Bye.